me hate all MAGA. Well, which ones? Because they now massively disagree.
But the through line between both of them is that all of the glue that holds both factions, the Bannon faction and the Elon together, is that they have an allegiance to Donald Trump. That is the only, that's the only long-standing principle between all of these people.
Brian Tyler Cohen had Cenk Uygur on his show to talk about Cenk's continuing to reach out to MAGA, to the far right, and to try to win them over, and how he believes he's going to do that. We're going to take a look at these clips from Brian Tyler Cohen's show with Cenk Uygur. I'm going to chime in from time to time here and there with my thoughts. Let's get into this together.
Now we've got the founder of TYT and host of The Young Turks, Cenk Uygur. Cenk, thanks for coming back on.
No problem, Brian.
So we had a conversation a few weeks back where you went to Turning Point USA's AmFest. You took a lot of heat. I defended you going on there. I think Democrats should go into every space possible and defend our values and not cede that ground to the right. So I continue defending you going on there and any other right-wing platform. But at the time, I took issue with you claiming that these people were, quote, for real about fighting against the establishment. And I asked you at the time what your red line would be before you realized that they're not for real about fighting against the establishment, that in fact, there's no long-standing principle among these MAGA people other than just allegiance to Donald Trump. Here's that clip. What's your red line to the point where you finally recognize whether or not the people who you were talking to at Turning Point USA's AmFest, for example, are not actually operating in good faith, and whether there is, again, to my earlier question, no actual longstanding principle, it's other than fealty to the God King, right? Like I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out here, because thus far there has been no indication that even though they say they're for anti-corruption, Donald Trump's the most corrupt guy to ever sit in the Oval Office, even though they say that they're, for the list goes on and on, right? It's the list that we have spoken about earlier. But when will you stop giving certain people at this event, for example, the benefit of the doubt in terms of their actions not matching up to their rhetoric?
My best guess is the anti-war stuff is where the rubber hits the road.
So you said that, quote, the anti-war stuff is where the rubber meets the road. So the anti-war stuff. Within days of that interview happening between us, Trump was asked whether he would give an assurance that his threats to annex Greenland and the Panama Canal wouldn't include military force. And here's what he had to say.
Let's start, if we could, with your references to Greenland and the Panama Canal, so forth. Can you assure the world that as you try to get control of these areas, you are not going to use military or economic coercion?
No.
And can you tell us a little bit about what your plan is? Are you going to negotiate a new treaty? Are you going to ask the Canadians to hold a vote? What is the strategy?
Yeah, I can't assure you. You're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two.
He said no, clear as day. And guess what? Nobody in his party abandoned him. Not a single Trump acolyte even spoke out against it. There wasn't a word spoken out against him. So I guess my question here is, are you prepared to concede that, like I said, these people do not have any longstanding principles? There is nothing that you can do to shake their support, and that you gave them too much credit for thinking that they care about anything other than allegiance to Trump?
Yeah, absolutely not even close. In fact, I think since then, a lot of interesting things have happened that have showed that I'm closer to right. And remember, I'm saying this as what I'm seeing and what I think is going to happen, but time will tell. So first, on Greenland and Panama, they don't really think he's going to invade Greenland or Panama. They think that that's his usual bluster. So I did some tweets about it just to, almost like test, do they have any kind of pushback, et cetera. And people were like, well, I mean, Panama owes us and et cetera. It's not like they think like we do exactly, not really that close. But when you get to, yes, but should we invade Greenland or Panama? Most of the comments were, no, of course we shouldn't invade.
This is one of the areas where, to me, Cenk Uygur is really wrong. This is just the constant MAGA playbook with any insane thing that Donald Trump says. MAGA just says, it's just a joke. It's just Trump talking. The left doesn't understand humor and jokes. Instead of coming out and saying, hey, Greenland is a country who poses no threat to us. They've never threatened the United States. They don't have, there aren't terrorists from Greenland coming to the United States and blowing people up or whatever. We made a horrible mistake by backing this guy who would say something like, yeah, military force could possibly be on the table against Greenland. But they're not going to do that because they're in a cult. And Cenk uses this anti-war thing over and over again. And the only evidence of them being anti-war is that they're anti the war in Ukraine. That's because, frighteningly, we have people within MAGA who like Putin, which is just a whole different level of insanity. But they are only anti-war when it comes to one specific war. They're in favor of other wars, that the proxy wars that the United States is paying for. And if Donald Trump did invade Greenland or use some kind of military force against Greenland, then MAGA would just fall in line and say, oh, I guess we had to invade Greenland. You know, there's no actual anti-war principle there.
Invade them, but we should put economic pressure, and I like the way he does his bluster, etc. So
but he's not saying that. He's not just saying put some economic pressure and I'm just doing bluster. When he was asked if we should rule out military force, he said no. Like, to claim that he isn't serious. If you asked anybody on December 19th, when Trump tweeted big protests in D.C., be there will be wild, whether that would amount to an armed insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, most people would say no. And most people probably on the right would say that they don't support that either. And you and I rightly criticize mainstream media for constantly giving Trump the benefit of the doubt, but you're doing it here.
No, I'm not. So first off, on all the things that Trump did after the election, I was accurate about that too. I said, no, Trump will do anything to stay in power. And he did. So I'm not 1% naive about Trump. So, but invading Greenland and Panama is comical. If he goes to do it, I will guarantee you that a huge portion of his base will actually turn on him. And because
boy, I would like to make that bet with Cenk Uygur if it happened. I don't think a huge percentage of his base is going to turn on him for anything.
It's frickin' comical. So, and here I'm not giving the benefit of the doubt to Trump. I'm giving some benefit of the doubt on some issues to his base. In fact, Brian, look at what's happened since we last talked. That this absurd comical conversation about invading Greenland is a tiny minor thing that's not actually going to happen. But what actually did happen is a giant war between Steve Bannon and Elon Musk broke out. So if you're saying, well, they're a monolith, well, which one's the monolith, Bannon or Musk? Because they now absolutely hate each other. Bannon for all of his evils, and there are plenty of those, and he's massively anti-immigrant, and I'm an immigrant. I'm, again, wide-eyed about that. I'm not naive 1% about that. But he's talking about raising corporate taxes. He's talking about raising taxes on the rich. And he's talking about how Elon Musk is a donor and that we shouldn't give into that kind of corruption. So now, on the other hand, I might agree more with Elon Musk on H-1B, but you can't just do binary brain and go, me hate all MAGA. Well, which ones? Because they now massively disagree.
But the through line between both of them is that all of the glue that holds both factions, the Bannon faction and the Elon together, is that they have an allegiance to Donald Trump. That is the only, again, that's the only long-standing principle between all of these people.
That's not remotely true, because if that was true, Bannon would have bowed his head to Musk and said, okay, well, he is a great donor to Donald Trump.
I hear what you're saying, but look.
That's just a fact, Brian. You can't deny it.
I hear what you're saying with regard to that, but Trump gets a pass in a way that every single underling beneath him doesn't get.
But wait a minute, Brian. So that's obviously true, but did Biden not get the same pass for a long, long time as his brain was melting? All of the Democrats were like, no, he's young and dynamic. Are you kidding me?
I think that you prove yourself wrong because you were out there. But I'm giving you credit here because you were out there. And the fact that people like you could come out and say that Biden should not be running for re-election. Of course. But look, the majority of people are going to.
So you're admitting that the Democrats are also a cult.
I'm saying that for a lot of the party, they are going to stand behind the president as he's facing re-election against Donald Trump. That's
okay.
Clear,
You're saying
clear
the
as
same
day.
exact
but,
thing.
But nobody.
We have to blindly support our maniacal president who can't even talk or think.
I'm saying nobody is willing or allowed to say an ill word of Donald Trump, even within these so-called competing factions between Bannon and Elon Musk.
That's not remotely true, Brian. That's not true. Look at the two primaries. Nikki Haley said a lot of unkind things. DeSantis did for a little while. No, hold on.
That's the primary. She's since come.
Nikki Haley was going against Donald Trump in some ways, but she wasn't saying progressive things, really. She wasn't saying, well, we can't have Donald Trump because he won't do Medicare for all, or we can't have Donald Trump because he's not going to raise taxes on corporations, or we can't have Donald Trump because he might have more wars.
Around and bent the knee.
No way. Now you're misleading. They had a real primary and Trump crushed them. We did not have a real primary. All we had was a bunch of jackasses who went, how dare you oppose Biden? To me, to Marianne Williamson, to Dean Phillips. Forget me and Marianne. To Dean Phillips, a sitting U.S. congressman, they were like, he is being disloyal.
I agree with that. That's true.
Joe Biden is great. Joe Biden is young and dynamic. You tell me that's not a bubble, brother? So, but what I'm trying to explain to both sides is you're both in bubbles. Please, for God's sake, think objectively. And this is the number one request that I would have of people on our side, which is focus on policy. Don't get into this cult of personality. Oh, that's a Democratic leader. Or cult of personality. That's Trump. We have to oppose everything Trump is doing. No, wait a minute. What is the policy? And if they say something that we agree with, for God's sake, take yes for an answer. In the middle of Trump, imagine we get a couple of wins. I know what the great...
You're not going to get any pushback from me. I agree with that. I would love... Look, if by some miracle we see the minimum wage raise, if we see pro-union legislation passed, if we see anything that happens that I want to see, I'm not going to trash it just by virtue of the fact that it was signed into law by a Republican president. I still it's the agenda, not the politicians that I'm advocating for. And however we get there is perfectly acceptable to me. But I guess going back to the initial point, the issue I have here is that while even people, sure, you'll get pilloried by a majority of the party who, of course, wants to see Joe Biden in the strongest position as he heads toward an imminent election with Donald Trump. But that is different than there being zero people, literally none right now in the Republican Party, Brian, under the Bannon banner or under the Musk banner. Any of those competing factions, nobody will say an ill word of Donald Trump, and nobody ultimately, at the end of the day, has any allegiance to anything other than whatever Donald Trump says. The Bannon people are not going to abandon. The Bannon people are not going to abandon Donald Trump by virtue of any policy position that he has, in the same way that the Elon people are not going to abandon him either.
Bannon said that Trump's position on H-1B was wrong. So you're totally counterfactual. So look, guys,
and not a single person will abandon him by virtue of it.
And Brian Tyler Cohen here to me is right. Okay, yes, there is a split to a degree between Bannon and Musk, but that's because Bannon thinks that Musk is not far right enough. He wants to be more punitive to immigrants. He wants fewer immigrants in the United States. He doesn't even want the legal immigrants here. That's Steve Bannon that I'm talking about. So, are there problems with the Democratic Party and the Democrats? Absolutely. I have lots of problems with the Democratic Party. Did they rig things in order to get Kamala Harris in there? Yes. They should have had an actual primary. They should have told Biden he was a one-termer and had an actual primary a year or preferably 2 years before the election to have a real primary. So I agree with Cenk Uygur on that. But I don't know what he thinks he's going to accomplish with trying to reach out to MAGA, who shares no policies with him at all, or the left. He believes that they're anti-war. I just don't see that at all. But as flawed as the Democrats are, later in this conversation between them, which I'm not going to show you this, you can go to Brian Tyler Cohen's channel and watch it. But Cenk talks about how the Republicans are saying they're not going to give aid to California. You're not going to get that from the Democratic Party. The Democrats are, and if you have a Democrat president in office, they are going to provide aid to all states. They're not going to say, okay, Texas or Ohio, you had a natural disaster, or Florida, you didn't vote for us, so we're not going to give you aid, or we don't think you should have aid. No, they're going to provide the aid. So if you want progressive policies, right now you're definitely not getting that from the Republicans. You're not going to get a lot of that from the Democrats. But there is zero chance of you getting progressive policies from the Republicans and Donald Trump. I use Medicare for all as an example all of the time. Yes, you're probably not going to get Medicare for all from the Democrats, but at least it can be a conversation. At least it can potentially be discussed. But with the Republicans, there's no way. That's going to be, that's communism, that's socialism, that's whatever ism you want to place on it. We have right now Republicans talking about getting rid of the $35 cap on insulin. That's not nothing from the Democratic Party standpoint. They're not talking about getting rid of that. They're fighting for that. So that's an actual more progressive or left-leaning policy that you're getting from the Democrats that you are absolutely not going to get from the Republicans. So I just don't, I don't know why you would, what would you try to, maybe this is a poor analogy, but would you prefer to tame a wild dog out on the street, or would you prefer to try to tame a wolf that's just killed all of your livestock or whatever? You know what I mean? It's like the Republicans are the wolf who would love nothing more than to eat you, and the Democrats are the wild dog that, is maybe going to be a little bit difficult to get trained, but you might be able to get it to come into your house and be friendly and let you pet it. Maybe an awful analogy, but, I don't see any way that Cenk Uygur honestly believes that the Republicans are going to do anything at all progressive, or that even a Steve Bannon, when he says, okay, let's raise the corporate tax rate, that MAGA is actually going to listen to that. They're going to ignore that part, and Steve Bannon is going to fall in line for other policies that he likes of Donald Trump and MAGA. They are just, Cenk Uygur is the useful idiot to them because he constantly bashes Democrats. They like that part. They're not going to let him bash Donald Trump. But let me know what you think about this. Do you think there's any merit in what Cenk Uygur is saying, or are you more on the side of Brian Tyler Cohen with this? I still don't really understand the game plan with Cenk Uygur unless it's honestly just to make more money. I mean, he can't believe these things that MAGA is actually anti-war, but maybe he does. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. I just passed 50,000 subscribers, so thank you to all the subscribers to the channel. This is Chris on Culture. I will see you in the next video.